On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder have extended Kenrich Williams to a multi-year contract. What this means for the Thunder long term, and what a great story that Kenrich Williams provides all of us in Oklahoma City. Plus, will the Thunder actually compete this year? And what will winning games look like in Bricktown this upcoming season? All of that and more coming up on today's Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your teams every day.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and editor-in-chief over at thunderousintentions.com, Rylan Styles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're going to dive into the Oklahoma City Thunder handing out a multi-year contract extension to Kenrich Williams. What is the long-term outlook for the Oklahoma City Thunder roster? What does this look like next year and beyond for their flexibility? And how can the Thunder compete this year, and what will winning games look like in Bricktown? Plus, just an awesome story around Kenny Hustle. But again, thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Thunder, your teams every day, making us your first listen each and every morning. Subscribe for free across all platforms so you never miss an episode. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball every day. So let's start with the fact that this is just simply a cool story. Like, we're going to get into, the nitty gritty and get into, how this impacts the team on the floor. But taking a step back, Kenrich Williams is a guy who had no Division I offers out of high school. He goes to TCU, is able to have a good career there, gets picked up by the Pelicans, and then he's thrown into the Steven Adams trade. His first year in OKC, he's on the roster bubble, but had a career year after surviving that roster crunch. Let's just stay right there. Surviving the roster bubble was already a huge cherry on top. A lot of times players will say things like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be in this position. And, we can all kind of see through that as player speak. Just like there's coach speak, there's player speak. Kenrich Williams is one of the guys that message really stays firm and is true. No D1 offers out of high school, goes to TCU, gets on with an NBA team, but then is just a castaway in a trade, is on the roster bubble. And when you look at other guys who are deemed thrown into a trade, Zylan Cheatham, Josh Gray, Darius Miller, those guys are just guys that are thrown into Thunder trades in the last couple of seasons. Zylan Cheatham and Josh Gray have played a combined one game in the NBA since they were deemed a throw-in. Darius Miller, of course, played like 12 games that first year for the Thunder, hasn't played since. So to survive that undertaking in the NBA, the dark side of the league is very impressive. It's kind of like we talk about with veteran players. They don't want to sign that first minimum deal because once you get bought out and signed for the minimum, you're viewed as a minimum kind of player the rest of your career. And so you kind of want to evade that branding as much as possible. You also want to evade this branding of, oh, we just threw him to the side. We just threw him in that trade to match salaries. It wasn't a big deal. And a lot of times that's just where your career starts and stops, and that's all there is to it. But for Kenny Hustle, he was able to not only survive training camp, not only was he able to have a career year his first year in Oklahoma City, he found a way to make himself indispensable both on and off the floor. Again, the career year is nice, shooting 40% from three, whatever is great. The hustle plays that he makes, the defensive plays that he has, that really help you and contribute to winning basketball and winning culture in Oklahoma City. But the the story I'll never forget regarding Kenrich Williams is after that COVID year where no fans were allowed, right after the bubble, but still in the pandemic and still no fans allowed at the Paycom Center. After the season was over, we had our end of season media availabilities like we always do, and Barry Trammell of the Oklahoman asked Mark, "How'd you guys do it?" Because remember that year, COVID was running rampant. Teams were having to use emergency players. Like, it was not going well at points for the league, back then. And the Thunder were able to evade all COVID breakouts and were able to evade all of that. Now, it ended up biting them the next year, obviously this past season. But for that time being, the Thunder had escaped all of the whole COVID outbreaks. And so Barry asked a good question, how did you guys find the motivation to keep doing everything the exact right way for this whole grind of a season where you're testing every day and you are kind of quarantining in your hotel room and only can go to certain approved restaurants, and you're living life kind of in the bubble, but not exactly in the bubble. Of course, you're out and about, but it's still very restricted on you, and just the grind of we're doing all this and losing games. Let's be honest, you're losing games while having to put up with all this adversity off the floor. How'd you guys keep a good attitude about that? And Mark, without hesitation, said that, if anybody raised, an issue or complained or skipped the test or didn't show up to a test, right, Kenrich Williams would grab you by the shirt collar, is how Mark described it. You notice how other teams had guys who just missed a COVID test or were late to tip off because they had to quarantine and then test that same day? That never happened in OKC. So providing that leadership, providing that stability, and having that presence about you, despite not being a renowned player, that all just shows how important Kenrich Williams is. You got to think about it again. Coming into that season, the pandemic season with no fans, he was on the roster bubble. He was not deemed a great NBA player by any means, and he did not have the cachet on the floor to be the leader that he ended up being. And that's how much guys just naturally respect him and how much his voice naturally, carries in this league and in that locker room. So he made himself indispensable on and off the floor. And I think that deserves a ton of credit, and that deserves, a ton of praise as well. And now he's a leader of a team that's very, very young, the youngest team in basketball still, especially as you move on from Jermichael Green, as you likely move on from Derek Favors, that average age comes down and down and down. As you do that, and as you get younger, he's a guy that has been kind of, and will be, the leader in the bridge between old school, new school, culture setting, foundation setting. It's just really happy for the personal side of Kenrich Williams, who was able to make this happen, and again, able to survive the dark side of the league. And he's a guy who wants to be here. And that might not matter in a place like LA. Everyone wants to be in LA. But for a small market team, for an organization like the Thunder, having a guy who says he wants to retire in Oklahoma City, even if he's not a superstar player, is very important and just gives you that much more of being a fan favorite and being a talented player and being a valuable player. Having somebody who values Oklahoma and values living in Oklahoma City and values being a part of this organization will help mentor the young guys even more so. So it's just awesome. It's awesome by all accounts. And as we get into this contract and get into the numbers and get into the details of it, yes, it's still a good trade piece. But for the time being in this segment, I just want to say, very happy for the person, Kenrich Williams, very happy for the position that he is in right now and he put himself in. And I just cannot speak enough to how difficult it is to survive that roster turnover and survive that outlook whenever you're thrown into a trade like that. So we will continue talking about this contract and get into the details coming up. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at BetOnline, folks. BetOnline is the fastest and best way to bet on all of your sport betting needs. Find the latest sport developments, news, and events, including the number one source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news from every league, from Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, and even combat sports, esports, and golf. So BetOnline is your continued source for the top wagers and information, lines, odds, prop bets, things like that. as well as podcasts, scores, and betting. They have you covered at BetOnline. Go there right now today on your mobile device or on your computer. It's this easy, folks. You type in BetOnline, and then you go to their sports book. And you might be saying to yourself, look, I only know about the NBA. I'm not going to bet on any other sport. You can bet on basketball right now today, and you might ask how you can do that. Well, you can bet on rookie season props. Chet Holmgren, over under 2 blocks per game this year. The over is at plus 135. If you believe that he can get over 2 blocks per game, you can make yourself some money at BetOnline. We are back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're talking about Kenny Hustle's new deal, and he signs that extension, and it's a 4-year deal worth $27.2 million, a team option on that 4th year. He is under contract for the same length that SGA is under contract, that Josh Giddey, Chet Holmgren, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, and Ousmane Dieng is under contract, plus, your 2023 first-round pick. Of course, with Chet and Giddey and Williams and Dieng in the first-round pick for next year, that's all based on the rookie scale extension. So, technically right now, if you went and looked at the long-term money, it wouldn't say they're under contract, but of course they will be because of the rookie scale extension whenever that happens in a couple of years for each guy. So this is kind of your group. It's SGA, Giddey, Chet, Dort, Kenny Hustle, Jalen Williams, Ousmane Dieng, and then whoever you draft in this upcoming draft. Plus, of course, you have the other peripheral guys who aren't under contract necessarily for this entire time. But the guys under contract for the length of this max deal for Shea are those following names. The most Kenny Hustle gets paid is $7.5 million in one season, and that will be 2026-27. This is still a huge team-friendly deal. This deal does not eat into that 2023 offseason cap space. There's still a ton of flexibility. Still, it could be a huge piece for you, if you need him to. But I believe that Kenny Hustle should be a long-term piece, and that Kenny Hustle should be a player that is a part of the core and a part of, what the Thunder want them to do in the future. Now, it can't always work out that way. And when you start looking at this roster, what players can you supplement with draft picks to go all in on a top guy and on a star player? Those names get limited if you take off, of course, if you make Chet Holmgren, SGA, and Josh Giddey untouchable, you take those names off, and then you don't want to trade rookie scale guys. You take those guys off. You're left with only Kenny Hustle and Lou Dort, and can you combine one or both of them with multiple first-round picks and get a superstar player? Maybe that opportunity presents itself, maybe it doesn't. But I think that in general, it's hard to gain a Kenny Hustle out of nowhere, right? Just like it's hard to create a superstar and to trade for a superstar and to acquire superstar talent, it's also very hard to attract and acquire talent that fits the mold of Kenny Hustle, who's a 3-and-D guy. It's a great culture setter. That's a great hustler that can set the kind of edge for you and set the tempo and set kind of the culture for your team. So I think that it's just as hard to find Kenny Hustle as it is to find, a Bradley Beal in a sense. Because look at the last generation of Thunder basketball. How often would we love to have seen Kevin Durant and Russ Westbrook play with a Kenrich Williams? And we just couldn't find one in OKC. So, of course, trades can still happen, and there will be opportunities to throw Kenny Hustle in a trade, but to this point, the Thunder have bypassed that opportunity. They could have traded him and sold him high during his career year at the deadline. Didn't happen. They could have traded him last year at the deadline. Didn't happen. He says he wants to retire here. The Thunder just gave him a new contract. He signed a very, very, very team-friendly deal. He could have just said, no, I'll play for $2 million this year like I will anyway, and then I'll test the open market. And if this is my best offer, I'll come back and sign it. But if not, I think I can get some more money elsewhere. He could have done that. He could have played hardball. He didn't do that. So I think that these two sides truly do want to work together and want to be in this contract for the length of it in Oklahoma City. And so I am interested to see how kind of the rotation unfolds and when this team starts to win, whether that be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, whenever that is. I think that Kenny Hustle will have his fingerprints all over it as a nice bench piece that can really help your second unit, especially not only get by, not only score, but especially just defend and bridge it back to your standard five. Because that's what you're looking for. Looking for a table setter. You're looking for a guy who can maintain the ship whenever, Chet and Giddey and Shea come off the floor in the playoffs to kind of level out those on-off numbers for those three guys. So hopefully Kenny Hustle can do that. Hopefully, of course, the Lou Dort contract can do that. But this deal, there can't be two sides to it. Now, I made my sides known about the Lou Dort contract previously. You can go back and listen to that. But that contract, I can see why people would raise questions about it. You can't question this contract. No matter if you believe that the Thunder should trade him or not, I don't care. The actual physical contract of 4 years extension for only for $27.2 million, where the highest amount you're going to get paid is $7.5 million in one season. You cannot argue anything but this is a great value for the Thunder and a great value for whatever NBA team possesses this contract for a guy like Kenrich Williams and for Kenrich Williams especially. So this is a great deal. This is a great contract. And again, you keep that 2023 offseason cap space flexibility. It's funny how that conversation has gone. Remember, back after the year was over, and then a week after the year was over, they had the Sam Presti press conference, and he talked about how he wants to keep all his options open for 2023. And so people were alerted by that. Eyebrows were raised by that, even so much that they kind of questioned, would Lou Dort even get paid, much less Kenrich Williams. And I think Sam Presti's done a great job balancing that. I think that he's done a great job of, look, we're going to pay Kenny Hustle, going to pay Lou Dort, but still, if they really wanted to next year, they have the cap space to go all in a trade and go all in and try to improve this roster in a big way and make a big splash while still paying these two players. So I think they did a great job balancing it. Now, what's that mean for a guy like Ty Jerome and Darius Bazley, who are two other guys who are extension eligible this offseason that haven't gotten a deal yet? I don't know if we're going to see an extension for either one of those guys, especially not Ty Jerome. I would be floored if we saw an extension for Ty Jerome. For Darius Bazley, I think that he's going to be a restricted free agent entering opening night in OKC, and we've seen this play out in different ways before. Namely, most recently, Hamidou Diallo, right? He goes in as an expiring contract, his last year in OKC, restricted free agent coming up, has a really nice start to that season. The season it was 2 years ago whenever there's no fans, had a really good start to that season, played great in New York, and then gets traded for Svi Mikhailuk and goes to Detroit. So we'll see how it all plays out, but I think that the extensions are done. Although I'd like to see one for Darius Bazley, I think that the extensions are done for the offseason. And then we'll talk about how this impacts the roster, but they've done a great job of making extensions, signing back Mike Muscala in the offseason as well, signing Kenny Hustle to an extension, signing Lou Dort to an extension, while still maintaining a ton of flexibility to go all in on 2023. And as of right now, I still believe that we will see a jaw-dropping improvement in 2023 offseason to this roster that signals, okay, they're going to try to make the playoffs. They're going to try to get there, and they're going to try to actually win a lot of games and kind of maximize this roster in the next offseason. So I'm very excited for that. Very excited for this season as well to see how this team develops and grows. Let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about this deal for Kenny Hustle and how you feel about this deal for the Thunder as well. And would you have extended Kenny Hustle? I think that it'll be a resounding yes, but I do want to know from you how you feel about this contract extension. But coming up, let's talk about how the Thunder will win games this year and what the formula to winning games will look like. Plus, I want to tell you right now to go check out the Locked On NFL Top 50. Which NFL stars move the betting line the most? Starting July 18th, Locked On is giving you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL according to odd makers at BetOnline. It's available July 18th on the Locked On NFL podcast, wherever you get podcasts from, and on the Locked On NFL podcast YouTube channel. Just type in Locked On NFL, you're going to find it. And it's sparked a ton of debates already, so get involved over there as well if you're an NFL fan. We are back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO Thunderpod. And I want to talk about the Thunder and competing this year. Summer League, I think, got us all excited, especially that first Summer League game in Salt Lake City. And it had some fans thinking the tank is over, and I still see that in comment sections on YouTube and stuff of like, this team's going to go for the play-in. They're going to be closer to the play-in than they will for Victor Wembanyama at the top of the draft. Look, I don't have a crystal ball. I've always been one to say, let's see this play out. Personally, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year if I had to bet money on it, but we'll see how it plays out. My question is, though, if you believe the tank is over and you believe that this team is good enough to go to the play and you believe that this team will not tank anymore and will win games, what's the formula to winning games as young teams typically struggle to win? I think that the formula to winning games is the Thunder battle, scratch, and claw for 40 minutes, and then it's Shea time. And if Shea can will you to a win, if he can make something happen with his ISO scoring or the playmaking off of that ISO scoring, then maybe you can win a close game and maybe you can, kind of grind one out. But that's very tough to do over the course of 82. That's very, very tough to do. And the Thunder won a lot of close games last year. And of course, close games in nature are more subjective to just randomness. I mean, remember the Pelicans game whenever Devontae Graham just launches a 84-footer just at the buzzer, and somehow the Pelicans win that game after Shea did the impossible. After Shea did the whole step back three for the tie, didn't matter, right? That's a game where you stayed in it all game, and Shea goes for that epic three, and it gets washed away by a even more fluke shot. Like Devontae Graham, love the guy, right? Jayhawker and everything. He takes that shot 50 times. He makes it what? 10? Like, it's not a shot you make often, especially under the circumstances of having to get the shot off that way. That's just one example of like a close game that kind of was weird at the end. So that's the formula. Can this young team battle each and every night, keep it within 10 points with like 8 minutes to go, and then can Shea just take over the game, take a blowtorch to the league whenever everyone knows that you have to key in on Shea and you have to double him and you have to put all the pressure on him? Can he make off of that? Can he score off of that? And can he will you to wins? And he will do that. There will be games in which he wins. There will be games in which he leads a comeback or he leads the team and he is able to pull a victory from the jaws of defeat. But again, that's a tough way to live 82 times a year. Not to mention back-to-backs, not to mention 3 games in 4 nights, not to mention any of that. And you will not head into many games where the formula changes. That formula is the same against every team who's better than you. Now, you're going to get games where, the other team is resting and the other team is not playing their top guys, or they're on the back-to-back, or they're at the schedule disadvantage, they're at the rest disadvantage. You're going to get games like that, of course. You're going to get games where just teams are not having their best night. I mean, remember the Denver game where Jokic was just awful and like they benched him because he was just so bad. Why even play him? Like, that's going to happen. That's basketball. It happens for every team, no matter how good you are, no matter how bad you are. That happens. But pound for pound, just in general, everyone healthy, the whole league healthy, you're not better than, 5 teams? Like, I think that this team is better than Houston. I think that this team is better than, Orlando. I think that this team is better than San Antonio. I think that this team can be better than Utah if they, once they truly trade Donovan Mitchell. We'll see kind of where that Donovan Mitchell trade lands and what they get back for it. And I think that they're going to trade off a lot of their competitive veterans as well in Utah. I think that they can be better than that. Detroit, I'd still lean OKC in that Detroit battle because of SGA, and that team does not have an SGA. But like past that, we're really getting down to it if everybody's healthy. We're really getting against it. That's already starting the toss-up category. So like, can it happen? Yeah, Shea's special. I think that Chet will be very good for a rookie. I think that Josh Giddey will be very improved. I think that Jalen Williams will be a huge net positive. As far as rookies go and young players go, it's very hard to have a huge impact and have a winning impact. I think that Jalen Williams can do that. I think that he can be a rare rookie where He is helping you in a positive way win basketball games, for sure. However, again, that's a tough way to live, 32 games. So I just don't know what that would look like and if you can sustain that over the course of a full season. What I think this year will provide is not about wins and losses or making the playoffs or not. I think that this year will provide some very exciting moments, some very fun moments, and a lot of development, and a clearer picture on a lot of guys on this roster for your future plans, because a lot of these roster spots need to get cleared up of, is he a keeper? Is he not a keeper? What tier is he in if he is a keeper? Is he one of the three foundational pieces? Is he a swing piece in the rotation? Is he a back into the roster guy? Is he not on the roster guy? Like, tearing off these guys will be very important this year and get easier this year. And then 2023, I think that you have a good draft pick in a very loaded NBA draft. I think you have a good draft pick in a loaded NBA draft, and you have the tools and the, I think, motivation to use that trade market to your advantage and bring in another guy who can solidify and tie in this roster together with another NBA proven guy and an NBA proven win ready type of trade for a star, or, you know, slightly less than a star, whatever you think you need at that point to win, and go for it in 2023, 2023-24 season. So that's where I'm at still. Where are you at? I just laid out the formula I think that it will take to win games. How do you think the Thunder will win games this year as a formula in this season? Let me know down below on the comment section on YouTube. Also on Twitter at Rylan_Styles. It's at RYLAN_STILES. Tomorrow will be our first roster projection. Friday, we're going to have a mailbag podcast, so put your questions as well down below. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.